Once upon a time there was a knight named Austin. He was a member of the Bear Kingdom's Round Table. He was a brave and loyal knight, friend of the king of the bear army, Jacob. One day the peaceful kingdom was having a beautiful banquet, when a villainous schemer came along. He posed as a friend, and he joined with the knights of the Round Table. He convinced Austin there was but one plan, an evil seen countless times. He went to the king of the bears, with a knife behind his back. Austin said, "Can I have a hug? I'm feeling down." And that's when he attacked. He plunged the knife into the king's back. The bear king was now laying dying. It was a brutal attack. But the gods of the kingdom did so weep that the king's punctured heart should freeze over, and his powers were born. Of course, the villainous acts were not done for naught, for Austin was granted the power of passionate flame, and so he used his fiery, menacing powers to dominate part of the kingdom, bringing about the reign of the fire. The new Ice King Jacob reclaimed half of his kingdom. One kingdom was now two, though, and their word forever altered. A friendship so strong, yet how did it falter? As the war raged on between fire and ice, both kingdoms' powers grew, attracting people anew. People joined both kingdoms, and they seemed all but nice. The kingdoms' mights clashed, and one thing was true. King Austin reigned with fear and might. He attacked the citizens and brought them into the fight. King Jacob ruled with love and care. Watching innocents die was more than he could bear. Austin's attack of neighboring lands forced many to flee. Many went to the Ice Kingdom, and their protection the Ice King guaranteed. A brave knight named Sir Green was among the refugees. He joined the Ice Kingdom and soon became a deputy. Jacob and Sir Green pushed Austin's armies back, protecting the citizens and then going on the attack. Austin now feared, and so he sought a new knight. Kyler was found in Austin's prison to his great delight. Kyler was granted some of Austin's power. In exchange, it was the Ice Kingdom he sought to devour. Kyler went to King Jacob, claiming to be a victim of the king's reign. Jacob believed him and granted him entrance into the ice domain. Overnight, explosions grew throughout the land. Sir Green summoned more snow knights. They were really quite grand. However, the explosions were too much, and they faltered and failed. Kyler then appeared, and with his sword, Mr. Green he impaled. King Jacob was trying to protect the young and the old, but this attack was worse than any story can truly be told. King Jacob saw that Kyler was to blame. He threw an ice spear with perfect aim. Kyler was hit and fell back in pain. He knew it was then he couldn't remain. Kyler ran off screaming, "How I love my work!" Kyler disappeared in the night with a devious smirk. The explosions then started in the kingdom of fire. After a moment, he stopped to admire. He was a traitor and schemer, but to Jacob it would seem like he was an Austin redeemer. King Austin and Jacob were allies once more. A truce was born to find Kylo, and the ward they'd explore. Austin and Jacob did search all around for where Kylo did hide. Jacob scouted ahead and looked on in horror. His knights were hung on spikes, and his people were held in tight confines. He contacted Austin, who quickly arrived, realizing Kylo and him were a lot alike. The two then clashed with Kylo, who quickly fell, but Kylo frowned as he had something to tell. "Allies, how could this be?" he proclaimed as Jacob smiled on. "You shouldn't have attacked the man who set you free." Jacob smiled as he said, "You created a truce between Austin and me." Kylo's face became quite puzzled, but before he could speak, Austin swung his great sword at Jacob, who froze it in place. Jacob then held his hand toward the sea. Austin's fate now looked bleak. A trident emerged, and soon Austin's sword would have to be replaced. However, Austin's hands then lit a fire, and soon an axe did appear. Kylo then used the opportunity to disappear. On his way out, Kylo flipped a lever. The imprisoned citizens then had zombie fever. Jacob held back Austin's onslaught as he used magic to heal the villagers. The fever subsided, ending that ordeal. Austin looked on in rage as the citizens threw rocks. Austin then shot flames where they froze, and they were blocked. This forced Austin to flee. Some citizens then began to chase, but Jacob stopped them and told them to stay in their place. He tended their wounds, and then they went to the sea. Soon they arrived back at the kingdom of ice. King Jacob then saw Austin's forces marching. Jacob then let his powers start charging. A wall of ice was formed, one that nothing could slice. The onslaught was unending. Jacob's powers, however, were not so unbending. Austin's army broke through after weeks of attack. As Jacob's power finally failed at repairing the crack, Jacob was holding the endless force all alone. His true power was shown. He was tired and weak from holding up the great wall, and now that Austin's demons would try and make him fall. However, Jacob held on, putting up a great fight. Austin soon realized that he'd have to bypass Jacob's unending might. Austin's focus then shifted to the children, you see. He wound them all up, and with that, it was Jacob's defense he was sure to disrupt. Jacob then rushed toward King Austin to save the kids, and with that, Austin revealed the power that he hid. His demons began to possess the kids as they screamed. It was worse than anything Jacob could have dreamed. Jacob wouldn't hurt the kids, so he froze them in place. His magic was running low as Austin laughed. "You disgrace! These kids are mine now. They will kill you, but yet you won't do what must be done." Jacob replied, "You haven't yet won." Austin laughed as one of the kids slashed Jacob across the chest. Austin then took the chance, leaving Jacob no time to rest. His axe flew to Jacob, who summoned his trident, but the army swarmed, and Jacob soon would fall. The story was not over. In fact, it had just begun, for one goddess in particular had another plan. From the clouds above she did watch on for many years. She saw the bear army. She grew attached to the bear's king, as when he fought it wasn't out of hate or to seek power, but instead for noble goals, like finding justice and saving others from tyranny. So when he lay dying, she was one of the first to shed a tear. But it wasn't until later when she saw her worst fear. The Fire Kingdom was winning. You see, its king corrupted all the knights. Jacob and his people were surviving, though it took all of his might. So the goddess Cheyenne decided she knew what she had to do. Turning herself mortal, this would start the war anew. Her powers were now tied to that of the earth, and she reclaimed some land long forgotten. And with her new earth kingdom she raced in, saving the kingdom of ice. Or did she? Well, that remains to be seen. This is, however, yet another beginning. So many more stories to be told. A goddess departing the heaven created a power that was almost unending. King Austin saw his chance, his own powers he sought to enhance. He used the great void and went to the nether. The gods were becoming angered and annoyed. This is what started the foul weather. The nexus of power flowed into the Fire King, corrupting the land, leading the gods to have an all thing. This was far worse than what Austin did plan. The gods then decided they had to stop him. So they contacted their fallen one, Cheyenne, and so it was done. Austin's light she was told to dim. Cheyenne bid Jacob adieu, and then she left to see her crest through. Cheyenne rushed to the portal, but she was far too late. When she ran in, she sealed her own fate. Austin's powers had grown. He cast a spell to usurp her power. With her magic all drained, her soul he devoured. Now he would go to take the ice throne. When he left the nether, dark pillows did grow. Jacob looked on in awe, but his problems had just begun. Austin was determined to be the only one. It was the lightning he could now throw. The dark bolt of lightning raced toward the Ice King. The bolt pierced his armor, turning it to magma. Jacob couldn't do his thing, as his armor turned into plasma. The pain was intense, as the armor burnt his flesh. The water flowed to him. It was quite the refresh. Jacob summoned a snowstorm that surrounded the land. It was too cold for even his lightning to stand. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, Sir Green came in, informing Jacob of another evil force. Kyler was in the Kingdom of Ice, and truth be told, he was doing something that wasn't quite nice. Jacob had his hands full dealing with the Fire Lord, so Sir Green was sent to stop Kylo, readying his sword. As Sir Green rushed toward the evil schemer, King Jacob realized Cheyenne hadn't returned. This caused Jacob some concern. He decided he had to see her, so he visited a great dreamer. The dreamer spoke to the gods. They said Cheyenne failed while in hell. Her body lay there defeated, laying inside of a stone pod. The portal to hell wasn't accessible from all they could tell. He cast the snowstorm spell and summoned an army. Make sure no one harms these citizens of ice. Then Jacob went to the dark pillar, a nexus of the dark forces, full of light killers. He created ice soldiers. They were reinforcers. The army fought some as he charged on in. It seemed almost impossible that he could win. But the fight continued, and he made it to the top of the spire. He looked on, and he saw the powers that made the situation so dire. He focused his powers and grew a bright light. With this, the darkness was put into quite the fright. This caused Austin to feel pain, so he rushed to the pillar, knowing Jacob was in his domain. However, he was too late. Jacob went through the nexus,
On its way through the darkness, it was trying to be infectious. It whispered lies into his ears. It preyed on all of his worst fears as it tried to control. But Jacob fought back. He wouldn't let it corrupt his soul. When he arrived, he quickly found Cheyenne in the pod. It seemed so easy, so he saw through the facade. He said, "Come out, you beast." The beast emerged, saying, "On your soul I will feast." A great battle broke out. There was no water, so Jacob's trident he'd have to be without. However, his powers were great, and with some effort, the nether started to cool. The beast said, "What are you doing, you fool?" The lava froze, and that area changed. Jacob's eyes turned right as he fired a great light. The beast howled in pain as it froze, as its molecules rearranged. Jacob then went to Cheyenne, and then the god's real plan had began. Cheyenne's eyes opened, but she was a demi-deity no more. Austin took it, but now she was connected to his core. She smirked and said, "Let's go fight." Jacob said, "You have no idea of Austin's new might." She then whispered to him her plan, and with that to Austin they ran. When they approached, Cheyenne hid. Jacob summoned his trident and threw it at Austin, who melted it. But Neptune's blessing was now on Jacob's side. A new trident formed, and with that, Jacob it allied. The new trident soared, and with Austin it hit. Austin's eyes filled with rage, and time reversed. This is how it all became undid. Fire Lord Austin was far too powerful. He went on the offensive and gathered his might. Black lightning coursing throughout his body as he created an army of towers. Beams shot from them, each taking Jacob out of the fight. But then Cheyenne appeared and said, "Those powers aren't yours. Your destruction is all you did ensure." Austin fell back in pain as his powers faded. The lightning now cracked and burned as his body degraded. However, Cheyenne felt the pain too as she fell to the ground. Jacob ran over to her, using his powers to heal, and with that, the godly power was unbound. It took a while, but after a bit, the ordeal was over. But Austin escaped, and he was madder than ever. Now he knew he'd have to be more clever. While Jacob was in the nether, saving Cheyenne, Kylo versus Green was soon to get out of hand. So Green found Kylo before the TNT he could plant. When he appeared, Kylo started a big rant. Green wasted no time as he shot from his bow. Kylo's TNT was hit, and it started to blow. Kylo flew back as the explosion hit him. Kylo screamed, "Are you really that dim? There's a war going on, and Austin has me real scared. He attacked me too. I was too unprepared." Sir Green said, "Then why attack us in this time of distress?" Kylo replied, "I'm doing my best. I was setting a trap for when the walls come down. I'd blow up the TNT and send Austin into the ground." Sir Green thought of the innocents who'd be caught in the blast, shook his head and said, "No, that plan shall not last." He charged Kylo with his sword ready to go. Kylo prepared as he shook his head no. The fight was really quite grand, but this time Kylo had nothing planned. After a minute or two, the winner was clear. Kylo was now filled with nothing but fear. Kylo was scared. He pleaded, "A truce I require. I want to be spared." Green accepted the truce for the kingdom of ice, and with that Kylo left with a piece of advice. "Don't break this truce, or I will see your death through." Kylo nodded. "This truth is something I don't want to undo." The dark pillars collapsed, but the corruption remained in the land of the flames. Austin used his citizens as offerings to the darkness. With this, the power of the black flame was all he could harness. The god he allied with was pulling away, despite how he pleaded and gave them power in hopes that they'd stay. He knew the light magic was only becoming stronger. He knew he couldn't wait any longer, so he devised a plan so wicked and mean it was more nefarious than any that had previously been seen. It all had to take place tomorrow night, as Santa was coming, a being of pure light. He devised a plan of his own making. His love for the season was something he'd be faking. He asked Cheyenne and Jacob to make it all cheery. A Christmas truth, they thought. That made sense in theory. Maybe Austin saw the error in his ways, so a tree was put up that brought feelings of peace and delight. It was truly a beautiful holiday display. Everyone went to bed feeling alright, except for Austin, who started to scheme, as the other two kingdoms lived in their dreams. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the land not a creature was stirring, except for one man. It was Austin, you see, up to some nefarious business. The runes how they hung by the castle in the air, knowing St. Nikolai would soon be there. The others were nestled, all snug in their beds, while visions of peace lived in their head. And Austin's hand bled as the runes grew anew. The runes grew dark as St. Nikolai flew. His Santa then fell, and a noise rung aloud. It was then that Santa sung, "Powers that be, protect me!" It was then he was encased in a wonderful tree, as Austin's eyes grew red. It was then he said, "Santa will die, kindness is a lie." Austin then stopped, as a laughter ring. Behind him, you see, was a devastating thing. Krampus had appeared, and with that Austin's heart turned to fear. A chain wrapped around him, and soon he fell. Krampus then threw him into the wall. His life did it quell. The noise of the screams caused quite a stir in the night, awakening King Jacob, who saw the big fight. Jacob rushed towards the Krampus, who entered the tree. The Krampus threw great flames, and this caused Jacob to flee. He called out to Queen Cheyenne, who responded rather routine. Jacob barked out an order, "Go save the Fire King." She then embarked, fighting the evil toy things. It was then that Jacob gathered his strength, summoning an ice shield and a trident from the sea. Krampus laughed, "To what length?" Jacob cut him off and said, "Fight me." Krampus threw his chains. Jacob countered, but still felt the pain. A great fight had begun, light versus dark. Snow golems did spawn. Jacob then made his mark. The golems then merged into a frightening beast. However, this didn't bother Krampus in the least. He snarled, fire burst from the seam. The snow beast fell, and so did Jacob's team. The fight wasn't over. Hope still burnt bright. The train was thrown once more. This time, Jacob didn't put up a fight. He was then pulled toward the beast. However, his trident did soar. The trident then hit the Krampus. Square in his chest, the beast fell back in pain, and he fled. But still Santa lay dying. Jacob looked on, feeling the powers he was blessed with. He then drew in his magic, as Cheyenne walked in bleeding, in tears. She looked at Jacob and said, "It was worse than I feared." Jacob looked on and replied, "It was truly quite tragic." Jacob's look was apologetic, as his hands began to glow, his magic to shoot into Santa, who laid below. Cheyenne looked at Jacob and sighed. They both know he'd soon have died. Jacob glanced back at her and said, "Protect them, okay?" She shook her head. Was this the only way? Jacob's life then fled from his eyes. Santa then could rise. With Santa's rebirth, light was restored. Cheyenne looked on, and Santa said, "His sacrifice won't be ignored. The Christmas tale has come to an end." But Cheyenne was left with 3 kingdoms to defend. The task was daunting, and war lay in wait. She then looked on, awaiting her tragic fate.
Much time had passed since the great Christmas scuffle. Much has happened, and the kingdoms now lay in ruin. The flower at Jacob's grave had grew in, and yet somehow in his tomb he had begun to rustle. Life flowed into him once more, as he looked around in a haze. What he saw, well, let's say, he was left amazed. A chest of armor and food galore. He took what he could, and broke out from the pit. He saw his own grave, and took what was his. Then he saw a flower from the goddess Venus, signed with a kiss. He wavered for a moment, and then had a sit. As he sat there, a polar bear attacked for no reason. Jacob was shocked as he fell back in pain, summoning his trident, as he said, "So this is treason." Why did it attack? This he couldn't explain. His magic had always helped them behave so tame. It was then he realized his magic was low. It would seem his power he needed to reclaim. He realized the gods could make his powers grow. But first, he looked at his kingdom as it lay in ruins. What was he to do? How would he fix this? And what was its undoing? He once had thought that with Cheyenne's rule, the kingdoms would be at bliss. So he sought out Queen Cheyenne within her castle. But the journey there was quite the hassle. A gas fireball flew, and Jacob's attention diverted. He slayed it and then saw Cheyenne's castle deserted. Outside was a grave, much like that of his own. Cheyenne was fallen, and now Jacob was truly alone. He grieved for a moment, shedding many a tear. It seemed he would be consumed by his fear. Then many gas did appear, and Jacob strung his mighty spear. He followed the shots and saw the kingdom afire. He thought, did Austin live? Could this disaster be his own? He ran toward the land and saw the great spires. The land was corrupted, and Austin lay dead. There was no time to mourn, as an army descended. Jacob was weak, but yet still he defended. As he fought on, he saw how far the corruption had spread. The kingdom of fire was taken. It would seem something evil had truly awakened. Jacob was feeling weak, so he started to falter, and he retreated back to the great altar. He put in a plea to the gods above. As he did, he saw a white dove. He hoped it was a sign and followed it through. The journey was long, but he never quit. He then saw a castle in the sky. It looked so majestic as it floated so high. But he started to shake as his body failed him, and then the light seemed to dim. He called to his magic, and it began to rain. The rain flowed through his body, numbing his pain. He then knew his journey must pause. He needed some sleep and went back to his tomb. He felt more at peace there, no matter the cause. And he slept, and he was filled with visions of doom. The time had come. Jacob was rested and felt anew. It was time, so to the altar he flew. A message was left from an old oracle friend. The gods have been silent to more than just you. I fear the worst. I know not what they've been through. A lot has happened since your fall. Truth be told, not even I know it all. But the problems didn't end. The oracle then warned of a cultist of fire who was manipulating the forces of life and death to their own desire. They brought back the girlfriend of King Austin as a test, but a lifeless corpse without a soul was now in the rest. This has disrupted the mystical arts, and it continues to corrupt many people's hearts. For my vision to be clear, the balance must once again be adhered. With this, Jacob summoned his trident and a storm, and traveled until the villains did appear. The cultists looked on in surprise and fear, and summoned lost souls that became a swarm. The fight was grueling as the souls did attack. Jacob summoned ice armor, but soon it was cracked. Jacob then felt his power surge, and from the sea, Neptune's armors emerged. It flew to Jacob, and with him it merged. Jacob then smiled, and the air itself froze. Not long after, all of the lost souls were purged. Now all that remained were two powerful foes. The cultist summoned a pillar, piercing his chest. As he coughed and from his lungs he did bled, he said, "Austin is the true king." And then he looked at the soulless girl in the cage. "Now rest." The creature looked angry, and it broke through the chains, charging at Jacob as if it was a train. Jacob was shocked by the pure power you see. Jacob said, "It is time for you to be free." With that he threw his trident into her chest. The creature fell to the ground, and her body was now at rest. Jacob then merged with the water and traveled back home, where the oracle ran toward him, holding a tome. The oracle's eyes darkened and bled. He delivered his message, and then he had fled. It read, "I have foreseen it all, and the last kingdom shall fall. The gods of light are no more, and darkness mights now will soar. The magic within you remains, and with it hope isn't lost. But you must find a way to restore the balance, no matter the cost. For the child of Zeus, on the castle above, appeal to his sense of humanity's love. Fight the creatures of corruption, and become the disruption." Jacob then knew what to do. He appeared at its door, but then the wind, how it blew, as it began to roar. It slammed him into a cage, as lightning hit it, knocking him out. When he woke up, he saw a man filled with rage. "You are evil, I have no doubt." Jacob was confused, as he responded with caution. "I am not an agent of evil. I'm an agent of light. I fight for it with all of my might. I am here for a favor, for darkness is rising." The man responded in turn with a devilish smirk. "Do you find me a fool? Do you think this would work? I see that armor you stole from my father's bro. You know the reason they're silent. This I know." Jacob shook his head. "Listen to me. Cheyenne and the gods are my friends. The thought of their deaths fill me with dread. I think with your help, this darkness can be put to its ends." The man's smile faded as he shook his head. "I also fear they may be dead." He then explained he was going to Olympus to see for himself, and he pulled a book from his shelf. "When the times come, read this incantation. First, find us some allies, and then fight those apparitions. I'll be back when I can, and together we will plan." With that, King Isaiah departed, and the alliance was started. When King Isaiah entered Olympus, he saw Zeus. He was hung up on a noose. Isaiah rushed, cutting his father down, but then the darkness began to surround. Zeus was dead, and the others too. Now it seems Isaiah's time was through. Isaiah shot his lightning into the surrounding dark, but the power difference was clearly quite stark. Isaiah screamed, "Show yourself, you freak!" A sinister voice responded, "Your future is rather bleak. I killed your parents. In comparison, you are weak." Isaiah's eyes then filled with rage, and then it was war. He was ready to rage. His arms crackled with power, and then with lightning he did shower. The darkness was seemingly put out.
He was sure he could win. He had no doubt. Then his father's body shook and twisted, and now it seemed were the shadows he did enlisted. The fallen Zeus turned on his son, who dodged as he started to run. But Zeus clapped, and Isaiah fell. But quickly he recited a spell. The spell was one of great might, and Isaiah's eyes turned a bright right. From his hand a beam of light started to grow, wrapping around his new foe. He then did a cleansing ritual, freeing his dad. Watching his father become lifeless again was really quite sad. Then from the shadows, Ares appeared. Suddenly Isaiah was filled with great fear. Isaiah then started to speak as he was grabbed by the throat, as if he was weak. He couldn't form a spell. He struggled and wanted to yell. The mighty foe smiled as Isaiah's eyes started to dim. It appeared his future was quite grim. Isaiah realized his own power he had to rely as he looked up toward the sky. And then lightning shot into his foe, but it appeared to be a rather weak blow. Ares smiled as he started to laugh. Isaiah then reached out and summoned Zeus's staff. He used it to push himself free. He spun as he counted. 1, 2, 3. That's when Ares charged and Isaiah hit, knocking him back, and with blood he did spit. Isaiah saw this and pressed the attack. Ares seemingly was falling aback. Then Isaiah used his staff for a mighty swing, but Ares caught it and broke it as if it was a mere thing. Isaiah was stunned by this impossible act. Ares' power was unparalleled, and that was a fact. Isaiah pulled a book containing a spell. He began to read for it, but then he did fell. He awoke in a haze, but it appears it had been some days. He was in a tower in chains, and spikes were stuck into him, causing great pain. He tried to escape, but the spikes only grew. It was then that he finally knew. He was alive as mere bait, and that was his fate. Jacob's mission continued as he sought new friends for the alliance. He knew they'd need more strength for their defiance. His people were gone and so were his knights. This left him with only his and Isaiah's might. So he gathered his strength and built an army of new. Snow warriors by the dozen is what he did grew. He then restarted the agriculture. Soon enemies arrived, as if they were vultures. He talked to them and saw they weren't all bad. In fact, most of their stories were quite sad. He allowed them to join the kingdom for sanctuary, though he did so while being quite wary. He had them make amends with all those they wronged, and truth be told, they found where they belonged. Now he had an army of men. He left them behind so they could defend. On his journey he went to look for more allies. One came to mind, though he thought it was unwise. He went to the legion of Chilo's domains. He saw it still standing, but no army remains. Chilo appeared and looked on in surprise, saying, "I don't believe my eyes. Jacob alive? And at my great land? Is it time I take my great stand?" Jacob smiled and said, "Do not dread. I am looking for Sir Green, or maybe the Crane. Have you seen them? What do you know?" Chilo responded, "No, I live here all alone. My army deserted, but I know nothing of that," he asserted. Jacob shook his head as he ready to go. Chilo said, "Wait, is that all? I have questions. I saw your kingdom fall. How are you back? Should I be ready for an attack?" Jacob said, "Yes, but not from me. I foresaw the end of us all, even thee. Help could be useful. Is there a deal to be made?" Chilo replied, "I'll join so long as I get paid. 2 horses I need, with that my help you've guaranteed." The deal was struck and the horses brought, and then they left without a second thought. They arrived at the portal to hell. That's when Jacob used his great spell. When the castle was in sight, Jacob whispered, "Are you ready to fight?" Chilo nodded, then shook with fear when the 3 corruptors appeared. It turns out his fear was well founded, as with attacks they were surrounded. Jacob's armor could handle the blows, but Chilo's crumbled against the foes. Jacob saw this and told Chilo to run. It was too late, and with one final hit, Chilo was done. Jacob's eyes turned right as he decided he wouldn't lose someone in this fight. Ice spikes sprung from the ground into the beast. However, it didn't seem to bother them in the least. So Jacob dodged their many blows, and his trident then started to glow. He shot a beam of light into the beast. It fell, and the others began to feast. They devoured their friend and grew stronger. But Jacob had no fear. He could go on much longer. He froze one in place. He then rushed the other, narrowing the space. The creature then swung its mighty fist. Jacob slid, making it miss. He then swung his trident into its chest. It fell to the ground as if a mere pest. Then he shattered the ice containing the other, and shortly thereafter, it joined its 2 brothers. He turned to Chilo, covered in blood. Jacob said, "Hang in there, bud." Jacob then used his magic to heal. Light was all the 2 could feel. Chilo's wounds were healed, and then he awakened. Truth be told, he was beyond shaken. He looked at Jacob in confusion. Seemingly unaware, he was angered by the intrusion. I didn't ask for your help, you stupid little whelp. He responded. Kylo then got up and started to flee. Looking back, he muttered, next time it'll cost much more to ally with me, as this time it was practically for free. Jacob once again visited Kylo. He was at the back, working in his silo. Jacob said, hello, Kylo. I request your aid. Kylo responded, what'll I get paid? Jacob said, depends on what you need. Kylo laughed. Hee hee hee. Well, I already have some mighty steed, so I want an army, armor, and tools, you see. Jacob pondered. If I give you that, do you promise not to be cruel? Kylo shook his head no. So Jacob frowned as he started to go. Jacob turned back. Help me. You know it's what's right. Leave the silo. I know there's still good in you, Sir Kylo. Kylo laughed. Hee hee hee. That is no longer me. I respond only to Mr. V. V for vengeance, V for vendetta. I'll avenge more than just my Marietta. Jacob then left, heading to the north, reaching the sea, and then his trident he called forth. He traveled the waves at speeds almost the speed of sound. On his search, he saved someone from the drowned. The two talked a bit, and then they became allies. The man came clean, vowing to tell no lies. He gave insight into the plans of V. Jacob then sent him to the Ice Kingdom through the Great Sea. As Jacob traveled, he remembered how far the Bear Kingdom once spanned, passing by all of his old land. Then he remembered an old plan, one shared by both him and Queen Cheyenne. There are villages loyal to the Bear King, not recognizing Jacob as the real thing. They trusted not the magic that kept him alive, not understanding how he could possibly survive. He began checking them one by one. He made some see he was real, and almost all of them knew alliances he had won. Though, to Cheyenne, he was getting closer, this he could feel. He saw a land he hadn't visited since the war. He stopped a meteor as it did soar. When he went inside, he was greeted by a man. Turns out he was the mayor, and let's say he wasn't a fan. Jacob talked to him, saying he sought his friends. The mayor replied, they were here. They'd be put to their ends. Jacob looked confused, seeing through the lie, so he replied, why would they need to die? I think that was a poor excuse, but why? Oh well, I don't mean to pry, but I think you know my friend's shy. The man looked around in a panic. His behavior started to seem rather manic. He pulled out his sword and charged the king. Jacob grabbed it, and then with it he did fling. Jacob replied, I will not harm you, and I have no ill will. Calm down and stop this fight, you don't have the skill. The man's mania seemed to swell, and his aggression level fell. The man replied, I am sorry. I believe you are who you are. But here's the thing. Many here do too, but they hate magic. I know it's somewhat tragic, but it's true. With the hate they do spew. I lied to you because my wife and daughter are gods. I wish you hadn't seen through my great facade. Her magic is gone. Green explained it before he left with John. Jacob then realized the truth. Cheyenne was Ethan's bride, and his eyes grew wide. As he said, I wish I was there to see her big day. But one thing is clear, it is here with you and your child she must stay. Tell her not of my rebirth, or the corruption spreading throughout the earth. I'll handle this with Isaiah, my other ally. We must ensure at least one old god does not die. Ethan replied, I'll do as you say, but come back here if you ever need somewhere to stay. Jacob smiled and said, only in a code red. I don't want to be the reason you are all dead. Where did this John and Sir Green go? Ethan replied that he did not know. With no leads, Jacob decided to leave and go home, as he might never know where Sir Green now did roam. But with more of his old kingdom allied once more, the Ice Kingdom's power had grown as he prepared to face the new war. King Jacob sensed a great change in the air. He made an announcement and told his army to be aware. A tower of darkness has returned once more. He hadn't felt this kind of darkness since the Great War. Jacob then arrived at the tower, and with arrows it did shower. He reacted fast and created a shield. King Jacob then made it clear the godly power he now wield. He flew in the air as fast as the light, and with one hit he showed his true might. The tower collapsed, and a soulless being crept out, and then it began to shout, How dare you destroy the Temple of Mars? With this land now we shall make many scars. The creature then raised its arm, and the dead did rise. Then from the ground lost souls also started to arise and swarm like flies. Jacob was alone and surrounded by foe. Many ice spears were made, and he began to throw. The spear stopped the zombie, severing the head, but the souls still attacked, filling Jacob with great dread. So he summoned his powers and shot a great light, releasing the souls and ending that fight. But he knew one enemy still remained, the soulless one, whose powers were drained. The soulless being looked on as he struggled to walk. Jacob stopped him and asked if he would talk. Who summoned the tower, and why here? Is this something I should know? Is this something to fear? The soulless being said, rather faint,
The land is something we need to taint. I was a knight once, before Kylo corrupted. I was a knight once, before my soul was disrupted.
Jacob then looked on as the being disappeared. Then with his magic, the tower of rubble Jacob cleared. Jacob then summoned his trident and traveled the sea. He arrived back at the kingdom as he saw V now flee. Jacob yelled, screaming, "Stop!" as Jacob then began to chase. When he stepped on a line and arose a great pop, TNT exploded, and with that Jacob fell back. He was caught off guard by the betrayal of such an attack. Jacob then looked around and saw a terrible sight. Around the museum there were countless dead knights. It appeared V had done as he always did. TNT is something he must have hid, using the guise of Alliance for entry, allowing him to get past all of the sentry. Jacob looked at the museum. The relics were gone. Jacob then wondered if he knew he was just Ares' pawn. Luckily, Jacob foresaw the break-in, and the decoys were all that V had taken. So when V's crest was done, he began an evil spell. The fakes lacked any real power, and so his soul he did sell. Claws cut into his being and tore it apart. It corrupted and tore right into his heart. The spell then began to change, and V lived through it, though rather strange. His body corrupted, and his soul mostly in hell. He was corrupted by his own spell. He did gain some power, and now with souls he sought to devour. I have killed many in my pursuit of power. I was warned of death, and I would stop it at no end. But in the end, all I ended up losing was my very best friend. My reign made many bow and cower. My friend arose from death's embrace, to my surprise and my disgrace. Violence was something my rule didn't lack, as I made many devastating attacks. Truth be told, my soul was fractured. I was a weapon Ares had manufactured. So as the fight raged on and on, more and more of me was seemingly gone. I was but his mere pawn. When the Ice King returned and fought back, surviving all of my attacks, my master lost faith and attacked me with his wraith. I was starting to weaken and lashed out for power. On many innocents I did devour. The day of my death I died a fool. That day was the day I died to a ghoul. Yet somehow he never lost hope. He brought me back, that silly little dope. Now I see Ares and him at war. I'll repay him somehow. Of this I have swore. But yet here I am, a phantom, an echo, blending in somehow, as though a gecko. The fire still burns, though somewhat dim. I must try and save him, though my chances are slim. Kylo was lost. This Jacob now knew. Any alliance between the two, well, that was through. So Jacob knew it was time to find his ally. Isaiah was gone still, now to Olympus Jacob did fly. When he arrived, he looked round in shock. The gods were dead, and black lightning flew to him. He quickly had a block. The lightning was strong, and the ice began to shatter. After not long, the ice shield now began to scatter. Jacob used this to his advantage. He controlled the ice shards. This was something he could manage. He sharpened them to a devastating point. He made them fly toward the shrouded foe, aiming toward the muscle joint. The figure dodged, but the hood was lost. Ares was standing before him, covered in thin frost. Jacob's eyes then grew dark as he yelled, "It was you? Austin, you compelled. All that has happened has been by your hand. You're destroyed and corrupted all throughout the land. It is time someone stops you, and that someone is me. Try as you might, I won't allow you to flee." Ares smiled. "Is that anger I feel? Give in to it, after all. I have caused this whole ordeal." Jacob then shook his head. No, I won't be corrupted. I won't let the darkness continue to spread. I will defeat you, but not to avenge, but to save." Ares snarled as he said, "You should have stayed in your grave." Jacob drew on the light and fired a great beam. It was stronger and brighter now than any he had ever seen. Ares tried to dodge it, but it was too late. It hit him and he fell through the gates. He quickly got up and screamed, "You have sealed your fate!" Ares then threw chains of fire that wrapped around Jacob, making him rate. As Ares walked away into a spire, when he returned, he brought back a cage. Inside, Isaiah was struck, beaten, malnutritioned, and weak. Ares looked at Isaiah. "I can feel your rage.
It makes me stronger, and with it, your future is bleak.
Jacob was saddened to see his friend in pain, and truth be told, he had fear that Ares would soon reign. Ares sensed that fear, and he summoned his sword.
I'll kill him now, if you don't declare me your lord.
Jacob took a deep breath and controlled his emotions. Jacob was weaker in Olympus, far from the oceans. Or so he thought, but soon his strength did swell. He had the strength of hope and light, and so he recited a spell. I call on the light to end this great fight. Free my friend, in this battle it will end. Light then filled the cage, and it blew apart. Ares glared and exclaimed,
That wasn't very smart.
Ares rushed in to behead Isaiah, but the light protected him. Jacob responded, Your battle's with me. This you should have expected. Ares glared and shot dark lightning galore. Jacob summoned his power, but through him it did tore. Jacob fell to the ground, barely pushing himself back up, though clearly he was strained. Yet he pushed on despite how he pained. He summoned his tridents, and with one he threw. It went to Isaiah in a devastating speed. Isaiah grasped it, and then it did flew, bringing him back to the earth, serving its need. The other trident Jacob used to fight back. Ares' sword was blocked, and the battle was long, but after some time, Jacob's trident did crack. It was clear that Jacob was strong. However, Ares was on another level. Truth be told, he could be described as the devil. Jacob continued to fight and dodged the great sword, but then Ares finally let out a great roar, destroying Jacob's defensive and knocking him down. Then Ares plunged the sword through him into the ground. Jacob spat out blood as he laid impaled. A fire arose that was something strange. It wrapped around Jacob, and then it began to change. Jacob was transported back to the earth. Ares had failed, and a familiar voice was faintly heard. I saved you, you nerd. Isaiah is the son of Zeus. He helped fight the Titans, forcing them into a truce. He was the warrior of the gods, though some would say he was rather quite odd. One of his greatest battle was against the mighty Thor. The Norse feared Ragnarok, and soon the blood began to pour. They sought to sacrifice many. After not long, few were left, if any. Odin was their god, giving the order, and Zeus was mad. The Olympians didn't want innocents killed. It made them rather sad. So Isaiah was sent to the mountain of Heminjorg. That is when he saw that Thor had made it into a morgue. Thor summoned his hammer and looked at his foe, as he said, Stay and help, or you better go. Isaiah's eyes darted around until he spoke. Why did you kill all of these young folks? Thor spoke again. It must be done. The end is near. They foresaw the blackening sun. Isaiah shook his head. Then let us find a way to stop it. This massacre is surely unfit. You must quit. Thor looked to the heavens, and Odin shook no. With that, Thor's eyes and hammer began to glow. He shot from his hammer, starting the fight. A beam of lightning, burning rather bright, it shot into Isaiah, who fell, filled with pain. Then he absorbed the lightning, and his power he did regain. Thor tried to push more power into the bolt, but he started to strain, and the onslaught did halt. Isaiah grinned, and then summoned his blade. With a single swing, Thor had been slayed. Odin then appeared with fiery eyes. He looked at Isaiah as lightning filled the skies. It shot into Odin, making him stumble. Then Isaiah did swing, and with that he beheaded the Norse king. Then the entire Norse army began to attack. As the battle raged on, the sun turned to black. Everyone then went still, as they all felt a great chill. The ground cracked, and arose a great beast. On their souls it sought to feast. The Norse army then turned to run, but it was too late. The beast had already run. He grabbed the ones who fled, and then they were all dead. Isaiah and the Norse gods then turned to the beast. They then charged it from the east. The beast growled,
You were all but foes. The sacrifices fed me, the vision my tool. Now I have arisen, freed from my prison.
It was then Isaiah recognized this beast. It was a Titan. He trapped it here with the help of a priest. Isaiah then shouted, Remember me? This time I'll kill you. You'll never be free. The Titan then smirked and had a laugh. Then it summoned a powerful staff. From there it shot a beam at Isaiah and crew. Isaiah quickly summoned a tornado, and away they all flew. Isaiah looked at the Norse gods who remained. Frigg, Balder, Loki, Freya, Freyr, Heimdall, Hel, Vidar, and Vale. He saw as their faces began to turn pale. They looked at him with faces that pained. We are dying now, we know not why. He led us astray, now we know we will die. Isaiah then shook his head and gave a great speech. He then talked to them all, as if he did preach. They rallied behind him, though really quite weak. Isaiah told them to surround him, as Isaiah did sneak. The Norse gods then started their great attack. The earth below them began to crack. Their power was mighty, despite how they drained. Isaiah was focused as he released all the power he contained. He read a spell to devastating effect. His eyes filled with rage as the Titan it wrecked. The Titan's power then were absorbed by Isaiah as the Titan collapsed into Freya. Isaiah was momentarily corrupted by the new power. He looked at the Norse gods, wanting to devour, but suddenly Frigg sprang forward, foreseeing Baldur's death. She stood before him, and then she drew her last breath. Loki stabbed through her, and that was her fall. He was the one who had planned it all, until Isaiah arrived, ruining his plan. Now he had to adapt as he started to scan. Isaiah then realized he had to release the new power. He fought back as it sought to devour. The energy was released into a ball. To Loki it began to call. The energy responded and started to fly. To him it flew, re-blackening the sky. Isaiah thought fast and threw Baldur's spear. It stabbed through Loki and the sphere. The power of the Titan it now contained. As even Loki's power it seemed to have drained. Loki was dead, and the Norse gods did cheer as Isaiah went forward and took the great spear. Baldur then went to him. Isaiah was now king of the Norse, so Baldur began to bow. Isaiah turned to him and told him Baldur's rule he would allow. Baldur was now king, for better or worse. Isaiah then entrusted him to keep the spear. Baldur agreed, and the two are now best friends. An alliance that was never broken until Baldur's time met its end. The story is one. Isaiah thought of while in prison in fear. He once had friends, but they were mortal, and life met its end. Now he relied on King Jacob's aid. His options he then began to raid. When Isaiah awoke, he knew just what to do. He would go to the Norse, so then away he flew. He thought of the Ice King, the spear he would bring. Then Ares would finally be at his end, and once again he'd be helped by a friend. The balance between life and death is the great veil. It has been twisted in turn, disrupting the scale. Now the veil has seemed to have failed. The dead are rising, feasting on flesh. Onward they march as they start to thresh. While the kings lay recovering in their bed, kingdoms are falling to the undead. Oh, they have risen and seek to devour. On you they hope to feed as you do cower. But don't worry, don't cry, please don't have a fit. Just try and avoid being bit.